the adoption of the agenda. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I so move.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We have an agenda. Moving on to adoption of the minutes from February 15th. Do I have a motion or any changes to the minutes from this date?
I so move. I'll second.
Thank you. Opposed? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? All right, we have minutes. That takes us to the first order of the evening, special use permit 22-08-2, Charlie Brogan Tourism Home. Ms. Summers is not with us this evening. Mr. Curry, would you mind cleaning this up for us, please?
I'll do my best. Thank you very much. Staff report is included in the board packet for the public and the planning commission to review. Michael Brogan and Joanna Cho are here with us. They have a property tax map parcel 41-3-0, 42 Blossom Lake Lane. The acreage is 24.357 and is zoned agricultural. Currently used residential and wooded. The request is to operate a tourist home pursuant to Rappahannock County Code 17036E and 17066K. The applicants wish to use the home as a 3-bedroom tourist home when they are not there. This is served by a private road, Blossom Lane. I did drive by that today just to take a look at the road. Ms. Summers stated that she inspected the road and found that it did meet Type 2 standards. VDOT commented that the entrance to Blossom Lake off of Aaron Mountain Road was adequate and they didn't have any concerns. The health department commented that they had no original documentation for the septic system and that the owners did provide a letter from All-Star Septic describing the system and noting it needed repair. And so it does appear to be necessary to ascertain whether or not the system is adequate for 3 bedrooms. The owners will have to hire an OSE or professional engineer to evaluate the system if they've not done so already and have that information for you to further confirm that it is adequate for the 3 bedrooms. Staff recommended conditions at this point are a maximum of 6 people. Standard no food service offered and renders at the facility, which is BDH related, and that the permit terminated upon sale or transfer of the property. All that proffered on the outcome of the analysis for the septic system. As the board's aware, the applicable code sections most pertinently are 17066K, and it appears those are met, particularly with respect to the requirement for private roads. And I'll try to answer any questions that you have.
Anyone have any questions? And applicants are present this evening. Did you all want to add anything to that introduction?
If you could use the microphone, please.
Hi, I'm Michael. This is my wife Joanna. We bought this place as like a second home. We love to use it, but since it is a second home, we just do want to be able to rent it out when we are not there. I did hear the part about the septic. There was also supposed to be a receipt in there that shows that it was actually repaired before we bought the place. I do, so it's not in need of repair. It should be fully repaired.
Yeah, it says in the staff report that there was a receipt showing that repair work has been done,
Okay.
and that they had All-Star come and estimated that the size of the system was 5 lines, and I take it that's sufficient for the 3 bedrooms.
And based on the state's response, I think that they were okay with calling it adequate. They said I assume in this meeting we deem that we do need a professional engineer, then we could go out, but they weren't recommending it. I believe they were just stating it could be a solution if there is more questions. I brought up to them about it.
Yeah, that's what I gathered from your report as well.
Okay, thank you,
What
Steph.
have you done? It was adequate. But when you bought it, there wasn't any indication about the septic system?
So they had done a previous potential buyer
Yeah.
did a full inspection and then backed out of the property. So the sellers made sure to have all this documentation showing. That's how we were able to have this receipt ready in front of us.
Okay, right, okay.
So
right.
it was an issue with the gentleman that was living before us, but they got it fixed and have had no issues since.
It's just, I know a couple of people have found their documentation for the septic systems under other people's names.
Oh, that's funny. So we actually have a similar, and it's not under someone else's name. The documentation for our septic tank is before our house was built.
Yeah,
So when I turned that into Michelle or whoever the delegate was that I was dealing with, they're like, well, we can't use this because it's from before your house was built. I don't understand. Maybe there was a house on this property beforehand. I haven't seen record of that. But that's why the paperwork is missing, is because there's something in its place.
The health department letter is up on the screen, and the health department acknowledges that the receipt was provided and led to basically an as-built of the system, how many lines, approximately how long they are, and likely width. But it goes on to say that while the Commissioner of Revenue's office states it's three-bedroom home, it is still necessary to ascertain whether or not the system, as described, is adequate for 3 bedrooms. And the owners will have to hire an OSE or PE to further evaluate the system and soil, so it is installed, soil that it's installed in, to make that determination. Otherwise, the system can continue to serve the dwelling as it has for decades, with the understanding that if the system fails, the owners will have to follow procedures to repair it. So how the Planning Commission and BZA ultimately want to handle that somewhat of an unknown, I guess that'll be up to you.
And I think there is some precedent for that too. We can talk about that later. I don't want to get too far afield. I just wanted you all to have an opportunity to add comments too. There will be additional opportunity to add comment later, and I certainly don't need to curtail anybody if they have something to say. And at this point, there's a public hearing scheduled for this evening, so I'll go ahead and open the public hearing on this topic. And this is the point in the meeting that if anyone has comments specifically on this property, this is your opportunity to comment on them. This is your only opportunity to comment on this application specifically in this meeting. If you would like to comment, please come to the microphone, address your comments to the Planning Commission, and state your name and the district in which you reside. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ben Mason, Stonewall District. My contention is that I've been there 23 years. I knew the previous owner, Ed Lucas. I've met these nice folks. The Airbnb ad that they run advertises it as being available for 12 people. That's not 6 people. More importantly, this is an agricultural district. I have a neighbor and a friend with cattle, and there's dogs that get into the cattle. This is an agricultural district. This is not a place to have an Airbnb. That's the law. That's the code. And for over a year, there has been an Airbnb there, and I've counted at times 10 cars. It's the law. I mean, we either follow it or we don't. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. We're breaking the law here, breaking the code. I think that's about it.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
I don't think I need a microphone. You hear me good enough?
Yeah. Because Marlena's got to write the minutes, so I'll let her say.
Probably I want to shake my head and scratch my head because I want to wonder why I'm doing here right now. For over a year, these people's been renting this residence out, not abiding by the laws in Rappahannock County. I'm kind of sick of seeing outsiders come in, purchase a piece of property, and they say the hell with their neighbors, their neighborhood, and their friends. We worked hard for this. I don't get an income from my house, a subsidy every month like they are. They don't live there. In your paperwork, is there a restriction on animals to this house? Is there, I'm asking.
This is, I don't want to get too far afield of the question and answer. I understand the point on animals.
Okay, ma'am.
And there are not currently any recommendations for restrictions on animals, but I understand your point, and it certainly is a restriction that may be considered.
Okay, ma'am, I own cattle, cows and calves right across the road. I've had one incident since they've rented that house where a dog's been on my property. A few years ago, I had a bad experience with animals, dogs chasing my cattle. And it was a bad outcome. I don't want to go through that again. I've already had one dog on that property. I'm not going to stand here and tell you I'm not going to protect my cattle. I know the law. I'm going to protect it. Okay? Here you have room for 6 people. How come I've counted 9 cars there? When I went to school, I never could get 6 people to drive 9 cars. Does anybody here seem that agree with me?
I would ask that you address your comments to the commission. That's just a
Okay.
standard request.
Also, I have 4 neighbors on that road that I make hay on the property. In the summertime, fall of year, I'm running equipment on that road, making hay. The wintertime, I'm running that road, bringing hay for my cattle and feeding my cattle every day. I use that road. That equipment is big. That road is provided by the residents on that road. It's like 11 houses. Every couple of years, they get together and they gravel the road. We all put out a sum of money. Now, I've got cars every week driving on my gravel that I pay and the neighbors. They never came to me and asked me what I thought. They never come and asked how the road was maintained, who maintained the gravel. Never come and ask me what I thought they were going to do. They rammed it down my throat. That's exactly what they did. They rammed it down the neighbors and the neighborhood's throat. That's what they did. They're in violation of the law. Okay, I'm a licensed state contractor. Before I can do business, before I can stick a shovel in the ground, I have to submit a plan, a set of drawings. They have to be approved by the county, the city, or whatever jurisdiction. Then, when those plans are approved, they issue me a permit. That gives me the right to do what I'm supposed to do. These people didn't obtain the right permission. All they did is show up, people walking up and down the road. That road sometimes is barely wide enough for 2 cars to pass. And I know some of you probably been on that road. There is no room for all that activity on that road. We invested in this property, and it's basically, I'll tell you what it is. Go out and purchase a house, let somebody else make your mortgage payments for you. That's what it is. I don't have the luxury of getting $2,000 a month from my house. You can like it or love it. Whatever you want to do. I know what it all is. Thank you.
I hate to ask, but could you state your name and district, Mr. Grigsby, for the record? Just for our minutes, we need to know everybody's name and the district in which they reside.
James Grigsby.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Hi, Max Rubin, Hawthorne District.
I'm sorry.
Max Rubin, R-U-B-I-N, Hawthorne District. My wife and I have only lived out here 8.5 years, not nearly as long as our neighbors, but I'm here in support of Jim and Louise Grigsby, who live the closest. Admittedly, while we live nearly a mile away, I feel like the standard would be if it were next to my property, how would I feel? So I'm here in support of Jim and Louise greatly. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Excuse me. Arlo Mason, I guess Hawthorne, I've never said it out loud, Stonewall Hawthorne District. I've lived on Blossom Lake Lane my whole life, along with my father, he spoke earlier. And, you know, I got nothing against people moving onto the street, it's a great street. I mean, I love living there. And so when I saw, you know, people moving in, that's exciting. I like having new neighbors, it's always new people, great, that's fine. But it wasn't people really moving in, it was just new people every weekend. And you can go right now on your computer or whatever, and you can look up the Airbnb listing. And you'll see from, I believe it was maybe April they purchased it, April 2022. You can see from April to even this month, March 2023, there's a review. So it's been listed, reviews. And people, I get, based on the reviews, seem to enjoy it, that's fine. But again, there's ways to do things. You know, you apply for a permit, you get approved, and then you do it. You don't really just buy a house, especially such a great house, it's a lovely house, family house. You don't buy a house just to, you know, turn into a hotel. And that, I don't know, I would like the letter of the law to be observed in us, and the peace and tranquility of the street, much like my neighbor. Thank you. And again, Arlo Mason, Stonewall Hawthorne.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Anyone else wish to speak? If no one else wishes to speak, I'll go ahead and declare the public hearing closed. That takes us to board discussion on this topic. Mr. Atkins, I think this is in your district.
Okay.
It's a little confusing because it says Jackson District on the application, but I know that's the difference between voting districts.
Yeah, so magisterial districts were set in the past, they don't change. The voting districts have shifted around over time based on the population swing. So this is the magisterial district as reported on the deed. Yes, it is confusing.
Yes, but we just had it last month with that other property too. So I guess if either one of you would like to talk about this first, you're welcome to explain things.
Okay, I'll be glad to start talking on it. First off, it has definitely been advertised online for a 5-bedroom, not a 3-bedroom, but a 5-bedroom. So my concern with the septic system, how long is this 5-bedroom occupation being going on, and what additional damage may that have done to the septic system of that? So that is a great concern of mine. Another concern of mine is the road. Yes, VDOT, the only thing that VDOT approved was the entrance, where the road ties into Iron Mountain Road. And I cannot agree that that's an approved private lane road. The maintenance is not all that great on it, and we already hear that a lot of the people are not willing to chip in and maintain this road. There's potholes in this road. There's some places I would question if 2 vehicles could meet and pass, especially large vehicles, like the Super Duty pickup or something like that. And then if Mr. Grigsby is on the road with his equipment, which he is definitely entitled to and should be allowed, I don't think he could pass. And the other thing is, another thing I have a concern with the traffic that's going in there. Now these people, whether some of you want to agree or not agree, they are not accustomed to driving in Rappahannock County on a private lane road. They do speed. They come in there in these luxury vehicles, and they think they're just in heaven. That they just do anything they want to. They can go anywhere they want to. They drive in at what speed they want to. So that is a concern of mine. And I also have a concern of the effect that this tourist home has on the surrounding neighbors. It certainly will affect the value of their property. If Mr. Griffith would want, if he chose to sell a piece of his property that borders that tourist house, I don't think he could get the price for it that he would be entitled to, because I don't know of many people that's out here in Rappahannock County, especially natives of this county, want to be put in that type of environment. But they live next door to dozens of people coming and going, total strangers, have no idea how those people are. They may be great, they may not be so great. So I have that concern as well.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins. Did you have comments, Mr. Light?
I guess I would like to better understand the nature of the road. Is there a road maintenance agreement, or is this just
No.
informal? It's just been an informal. That's my only comment for the time being. I mean, I share the concern. I guess I would just say, some of these concerns, clearly, our zoning ordinance does allow for these kinds of uses by special exception permit, which is why we're here tonight. I do think it's always unfortunate that when these things get ahead, and that's not a good practice. But that's all I have at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Light. Anybody particularly want to get started on this?
I have one question. It's stated in here, I mean, I'm looking at one of the reviews, and it actually says, for our 10 guests. And you're proposing how many guests? So, yeah,
So,
I'm sorry, I should have asked earlier, but
no, it's fine. For the number of bedrooms, so we did originally list it as a 5-bedroom. When we got our sheets from the Commissioner of the Revenue's office and noticed that it was 5-bedroom, we talked thoroughly with Michelle, she's here tonight. And so she's the one who suggested us to reduce our listing down to 3 bedrooms to be in compliance with the permit that we're applying for. We left the number of beds, but we're open for discussion on what we needed to be within compliance for the special use permit.
and how long approximately have you been advertising as a tourist home?
Since last May or April, or whenever the first one was. We bought it in November of 2021, and we've been filling it with furniture, furnishing it. And, we do love staying there. And Mr. Grisby, that was my dog. I'm sorry for we were
Yeah,
trying
but
out
do you
this.
have any stipulation?
I'm sorry.
Please
I'm sorry.
address
I'm sorry.
honest with everybody.
Yeah,
And I do ask,
comment that about the dog earlier. That was actually my dog. We were working on a new type of collar for the dog, and it did not work. So back to the leash it was.
I think more to the point here, do you currently allow dogs on part of your guests?
No,
I
we do
don't-
not.
The-
Just
my-
our
my la-
silly dog.
My last question would be, is there any posted, granted it's a private driveway, but is there any posted speed limit on the driveway, or is it just, there's no sign?
There's children crossing signs, but I don't think there's a speed limit. So.
I think it might be further in the road, Mr. Frisbee could probably speak to better, but I believe it says 15. And we actually, while we were staying there, sorry, I'm not on the microphone, but.
Oh,
Can I?
if you step up, that would be great.
Okay,
I'm so
I just
sorry.
wanted to add, since, I kind of started this whole thing of wanting to find a place for us, and for our family out here, I want to speak to it, but, in terms of, I just lost my train of thought, because I have mom brain now. What were we just
I'd ask you to-
Sorry, I have 2 hours of
Speed
sleep right
limits.
now. Oh, speed limits, thank you. Thank you so much. When we were staying there and with our families, we actually noticed other cars speeding there as well, which is why in our messages to our guests that stay there, we do say, like, please be mindful of the speed there because, well, we have a baby now too, and we like to go on walks there, and this was even before we had a baby, but like when I was pregnant, I didn't want to be passed by speeding vehicles, which I think were still happening there by the residents who live there. So I just want to say we are very mindful of that, and also just I don't know if you had a conversation with somebody or not, but we're happy to, figure out the road situation. I wasn't aware that there was an informal agreement to chip in and maintain that. Of course, that is, if I were in that position, I would feel the same. So, don't take that lightly at all. I'm just kind of glad we heard about that somehow through this forum, but wish we had heard about that sooner.
Did I answer your
That
question,
answers
Mr.
my
Sid?
question. Thank you.
Staff? Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Curry, we know that the road is type 2. I drove down and looked.
Type 2 standard has a number of different requirements. Minimum travel way is only 12 feet, but then it does require at least once every 300 feet to have a passing. This road is essentially allows passing the entire length. There may be very short stretches that it's narrower than 2 cars. There are some crowning requirements. Hard to analyze that with specifics, but generally in most places it looked appropriately crowned. There might be a place or two that are abnormal because there's driveways intersecting and things like that. I didn't see anything on my drive-through today that would suggest that it wasn't, but that's not a 100% guarantee. If somebody went out there with a surveyor equipment that they could identify a crown as an inch off or something like that.
It seems like, I don't know if it's just since I've been on here, but it does seem like there is more and more tension about the Airbnbs. And it's clearly permissible by special use permit under our zoning. But we can impose conditions that might make it more compatible with the neighborhood. Like that there be no dogs and that there be a limited number of guests. Certainly no more than the septic system can handle. And we're not even sure what that is. So that would be step one, I think, prior to approving a permit.
I agree. I would think that you would have to address the 5 bedrooms versus 3 first. And then couple that, because we can do something, doesn't mean you have to do something. I mean, it's allowed, but I would also like again, based on the reviews, 10 people, for all purposes, that could be 10 cars, which is clearly over. So that would have to be another, in my opinion, another thing that would have to be addressed.
And I did print this out for everyone tonight. I did request that copies of this be made available to everyone because it's something that someone had alerted me to. And so I went looking to see, I don't like to just operate on rumors. I'd like to go and research and see the facts for myself. And I have a couple of issues with how this can continue given sort of the step that it started with. And it's my understanding from looking at records online that the property was purchased in November 2021 and that it was started, the first review is April 2022. So sometime between November 2021 and April 2022, the property was listed on Airbnb, and you all received your first review in April 2022.
Do you have the name of the reviewer?
I just have printed out
Okay.
June, I
If
think.
it's Andrea, Ann, or Meg, or Colleen, that's a friend, a mother, a sister, and a sister.
Oh, okay. So you had some folks review just to sort of build some traffic.
Yes,
Who
we
would-
do.
who would send
Okay.
it?
Yeah.
So,
We had our, as we have been staying out there, we've had plenty of personal guests.
I presume that this was flagged by the Commissioner of Revenue.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
they are routinely reviewing Airbnb listings,
Mhm.
identifying them in the field, cross-linking with Ms. Summers, determining who has and does not have permits, and then sending friendly letters.
yeah.
And then when they learn of this, most of the time they have no idea that there was a zoning requirement.
Correct.
Who does pay attention to that? Then they're forced to stop, they're forced to come apply or just cease.
Yeah, Mary Graham and her staff do a great job with that. It's good to have an example because people always ask me, when did that happen? So I did print this out, and so, I mean, it's been rented, and there were two things that I saw in the reviews that I was really concerned about. Well, there's three things in the Airbnb listing that concern me, so I printed them out for everyone tonight. But what we have is that it's listed as 3 bedrooms, but there's rooms that clearly have beds in them that are sleeping rooms that are labeled as living room 1 and living room 2.
Right.
And if you have a bed in it, to my mind, that makes it a bedroom.
Okay.
It's sleeping quarters. So I understand that one of the bedrooms has a small window, is that correct? One of the underground bedrooms has a small window,
Right.
and the other one has no windows.
Mhm.
I don't think that should happen.
Okay.
And it's mentioned in your reviews that there were people sleeping in a room with no windows. And that's very dangerous from a public safety standpoint. God forbid something should happen and there be an emergency in the night. There would be no way for people to get out of that room if their doorway was locked. So that's very troubling. I only printed out a couple of the reviews, but y'all are welcome to go on and look at for yourselves. There's 19 reviews listed. The reviews, the trends are the same, and I have screenshots of them. I'm happy to read them. But basically, it's encouraged as a rental for large parties. People saying it was great. They had a birthday, 8 people, 10 people, 12 people. This is tough for you all because basically we're asking you to put the toothpaste back in the tube and take your property that's reviewed as a place for large parties and take it down to 3 bedrooms, maximum 6 people. And I really am concerned, share your neighbors' concerns that it's going to be a hard thing for you all to control. So you live in DC. Who manages the property for you here in Rappahannock if something happens?
Oh, we're a phone call away.
Okay.
We drive out.
Okay, so you don't have an on-site representative or management company? No.
On the property.
Yeah.
Okay, but in the county, you don't have an on-site management company for the
We
property?
have a cleaning team that we've built a relationship with, and so there's a fella who, Will, he comes out, he's in Culpeper, so he's very close by.
Okay, so there's someone from Culpeper that will respond if something should go on the property. That's the closest. Okay. Well, I share my colleagues' concerns about the septic. I think that's a big question mark, and we do have a history of I believe it was the Ford tourist home application that was a big stumbling block on in the Sperryville area, and they were asked to do a big dive on that information and actually improve their their septic field as a condition of the permit. So those are my immediate thoughts, and I look forward to hearing other comments. Mr. Henry?
Your typical stay, I see the price here on top of the, for a night. Your typical guest stays how many days? Do you have a minimum, or do they stay what they want to?
Minimum of 2. Usually just rents out on the weekends.
Good.
We try to make holiday weekends a 3-day minimum, but we don't get many week-long stayers.
Yeah. It seems that the road down there, actually, where you go in until you get a little bit past your house, seems like to me it might be a little wider than the balance of the road is. I guess over time it's just gotten used more at the front. It seems to be a little bit wider, but it seems like the access is better in a width, in terms of width, at the beginning up there than it is past your property down there deeper into the subdivision. We struggled with these kind of issues that you're dealing with tonight a couple of years ago, where we were getting Airbnbs in a rural area, and the neighbors were concerned about people not being familiar with the neighborhoods and coming in for 2 or 3 nights and basically didn't know the standards, what the people in the neighborhood did and what they didn't do. And they were concerned about, people coming in for a short period of time that was changing their community standards, their community lifestyle, such that. And we decided that 10 acres was basically the minimum site size for ag area Airbnb, so that there's an opportunity for whoever came to the property to stay on the property, do whatever they wanted to there, and not provide some buffer to the neighbors. So it's very nice that, you have 24 acres here.
I read that.
Yeah. So, having said that, to the neighbors, these applicants, they cross a lot of the hurdles in terms of what's required. We've addressed the road, there's questions about the septic system. And recognizing the balance here between what you all want to do and what the neighborhood is and what their standards are and things like that, I think it's appropriate that maybe we should be looking at a use here of only 2 to 3 people, adults. I mean, whether it's one couple, 2 people being one couple, and maybe one more person. The only thing I would add to that is that if a couple wanted to come out here with their children, that would be appropriate. But I'm tending to think that most of the properties in there are single-family residents, and if you had 2 people in there, that would resemble what's already going on there with the other residents in terms of single occupancy by a couple people, and children would be typical. I'm tending to think that that would solve the issue of the drain field if we had use of it by one couple. And that would probably say it would only be 1 car, maybe 2 cars if one of the spouses or other people came out later with some kids. So I think it would limit it to no more than 2 cars, which would be kind of typical of the neighborhood. You would have a use then that's typical of the neighborhood, and hopefully the impact to everybody would be pretty neutral. So that's my thing. I'm below 6, and I'm down to, 1 couple or a couple with their children, dependents under 18 years of age. That's why I'm at.
Thank you.
May I ask a question or no?
Yeah.
This question's for you, just based on what you had said, if that's okay. Or
I mean, some give and take with the board is normal.
Okay. I was wanting to ask you your thoughts on that were, like just for guests or just in general, since, in our personal time, because it is a larger home, we have lots of family come together. We're actually, having his whole family
Your
over
family don't
next
count.
weekend.
Your family's exempt.
We're only
As long as
talking
you
about
don't-
just
No, I'm
As long
just
as you don't
saying,
charge your family.
Well,
But we need the
Sometimes.
reviews. We need the reviews.
but I guess, the point I'm trying to, I guess, just tease out here is that, we will have multiple cars there sometimes. We will always, of course, be mindful, but, this is a family home, like we said, and so our reasoning for wanting to get this place out here was to, as we built our own family, host our families here together, and, that's just something I wanted to share. I completely understand your thoughts on, considering like the limitations for outside guests, but, we still want to have our families come here and they're going to use the roads, they're going
Restrictions are
to.
only limited to the application
I
for
understand,
us.
I'm just trying to make a point here, right? Like, they're going to be.
The county has no restrictions on your family coming to you.
Sure,
I think the question
absolutely.
is
That's,
enforceability of it,
Well,
and people are gonna, are we gonna be going out there whenever there's a family? That, to me, that's the issue with this kind of thing. How is it really practically enforceable? But I know that you haven't said that yet, but that's what I feel like you're getting at.
well, and we can, in terms of the listing and how it's set up,
What do you,
physically, we can fit 12 people, right? We can fit 12 people there if we want to limit it to 8 because there are 3 bedrooms. There's our master and then our 2 bedrooms upstairs, and that's 3 couples. And that kind of tends to be how it works out, right? When
see, what you, all these things you just said goes against the community standards down there of your neighbors. Your neighbors don't live that way, they don't occupy their houses that way. And you using your property like that would basically disrupt their peace and harmony. Whether it's visual, whether it's noise, whatever. So, what I'm saying is, what I'm proposing is that you would duplicate what's already going there. Now, if your family wants to come out, that's fine, visit you, that's fine. We have no control over family visitations. But if we find that you're using that as a escape to charge, that won't set good. If we find that out, your thing will get revoked. So,
Before we limit it to 3 adults, I expect us to try to get.
hey, this is an ag area, it's not a commercial venture. We're not here to guarantee you $2,000 a month. We're not guaranteeing you $400 or $500 a month. We're trying to set up something that's compatible with your property, with your neighbor's property. It wouldn't matter whether your house had 12 bedrooms or 4 or 5 it has now. I mean, it's what will fit into the neighborhood and not cause any disruption in the community. So it's whatever my fellow board members want to pass on. And we're going to make a recommendation tonight, I guess, to the BZA, and then the BZA is going to have the final say.
All right, is there a motion that anybody would like to make in regards to this application?
I'll make a motion that we recommend to the BZA approval of the use of this house for no more than 2 adults and 2 cars, and it will be allowed for dependents, legal dependents of any occupant, rental occupant, to bring their dependents to the house. Dependents being described as your immediate children. And no dogs, or cats, or chickens, or anything else.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion, just for discussion purposes.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Light. It sounds like you have some things to discuss.
Well, I do think the road maintenance issue to me is always a challenge. I mean, I would like to see in these situations, I mean, I know there's a right of way, so presumably that gives you the right to access it. But it seems to me the one way to make this somehow more attractive to the neighbors is to take on something of disproportionate share of the road maintenance if in fact you're kind of using it in a disproportionate way. In some ways, if we could turn back the clock and we started with that kind of outreach, we might be in a different place tonight. So I'm not sure how to incorporate that into the motion, but
Mr. Light, I'll give you something to think about. So with the motion I just recommended, their use of that road will be no more than what it would be if they were there full-time.
I would just add too that I understand your concern, Mr. Light, and I do agree that there may be some retroactive concerns to address, and I think the points of the neighbors are very valid. And this is the kind of thing that I would encourage the applicant to discuss with their neighbors as to how to repair your relationship so that going forward, you've put to rest what transpired before and have a good understanding in place for the future. If you're able to do that successfully, maybe this won't come up when you come before the BZA. That's the best solution. Okay, so do we have any, okay, go ahead.
Could I add something?
Absolutely.
Okay. I also think that we need to keep in there this no food service will be offered to the renters of this facility.
Yeah.
And I also suggest that we add a 1-year limit on this one and have them come back for approval in 1 year. This will give the neighbors an opportunity to see how this works. If it works out, then the neighbors will be the one who can tell the story if it's working. So that would be my suggestion. They have an opportunity to come back in 1 year, and then they're going to be the enforcers of what's going on down there. We don't need to have to call the sheriff, deputy to run down there to enforce something. So I would like to see a 1 year limitation, and we come back before the board.
if I could just comment on that before, I understand we have to maybe amend the motion, but ordinarily, I don't like those kind of time limits, but in this case, since we're already kind of trying to get the proverbial toothpaste back in the tube, I think extraordinary measures may be called for. We were having this conversation, you know, when they were contract buyers and they could decide what to do, you know, I would have more concern about that, but since that's not an issue here, I actually would support that time limit as well, if Mr. Henry would be inclined to amend his motion.
Are you so inclined, Jack?
Is that the only amendment while we're talking amendments?
Is there anything else in the
The
staff
health
report?
department recommended the no food service, and then the only other thing in the staff report was the number of people, and that the permit would terminate upon sale, or transfer, but that you could add that together with a terminate upon sale.
Does anyone have any other,
Do you have the emergency numbers that are posted anywhere in the house in case there's a fire, as an example? Or fire extinguishers?
Yes.
Tommy, do you have anything to add?
No, everything's been addressed. The one piece, coming from the law enforcement side, I will tell you that on a side note, that one room that's being utilized without another exit, that's a huge liability.
That has been noted, that we can address that.
All right. So it sounds like there is a request to amend the motion to include 1 year from date of issue expiration date, and then no food services indicated in the staff report. Are you agreeable with that, Mr. Henry?
Yes. Mr. Curry, will you please read out the motion, please?
2 adults with, recommendation to approval to the BZA, conditioned, limited to 2 adults with legal dependents, maximum 2 cars, no pets, 1 year termination, and no food service.
Or termination, or upon transfer, that same language. We're not replacing that language, we're just adding 1 year, right?
Terminates on the transfer or sale,
Yes.
and 1 year.
Yes.
Can I make a request? If we're doing the 1 year, can I request that we do the 6 adults, to see how that works for the full year, since that is what our septic tank is built to?
But that doesn't match your neighborhood standards.
I think what you're hearing tonight is that we're not inclined to make that recommendation. We don't make the final decision. The BZA will decide what your final terms will
And
be.
you don't recommend, gotcha.
Yeah, we make a recommendation based on our understanding and what we hear from the public and what it works. So we have a motion and a second. Sounds good. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. All right. So we have that, you now have your recommendation in place. You're free to go, you're free to stay. Everyone else is free to go or stay as you would like for the rest of the meeting.
Were they going
But, you know, I can tell. It's all about.
All right. That takes us on to the next item on the agenda, special use permit 2302-02, the Ellis Tourist Home. This is our second scheduled public hearing this evening. Mr. Curry, would you mind to?
This man, named Ellis Neave, yeah. Oh, Neave, yes. Sorry. Present with us in the room, tax map parcel 4814H. This is SUP 230202, as you noted, and I didn't note last time, this and the other public hearing were advertised in local newspapers required by the code and they were revised. This property is located at 1070 FT Valley Road, 12.787 acres, also zoned agricultural, currently used for residential and agricultural purposes. The application is to operate a tourist home pursuant to 17036E and 17066K of the Rappahannock County Code. Applicant wishes to use the home as a 3-bedroom tourist home with a pull-out couch in the basement. Health Department commented that there is no original documentation, or no documentation has been found for the septic system. The owners provided a letter from Butler Niker Septic Cleaning that confirms the existence of a conventional septic tank drain field system and indicates that it was functioning without signs of malfunction as of November 2022. According to the Commissioner of Revenue, it's a 3-bedroom home, and there's a note that is still needs to be determined whether or not the system is adequate for 3 bedrooms. Just because it exists doesn't mean that it is adequate. And Health Department recommends that an OSE or PE evaluate the system to determine if it is capable of handling that kind of use. VDOT commented, had no objections. This is directly accessed off of a primary highway. Staff recommends a maximum of 8 guests and similarly no food service offered. As well as typical that the permit would terminate upon sale or transfer of the property. The items within 17066K appear to be addressed relative to the acreage and the other restrictions. I'm happy to answer any questions if you happen to have them.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? All right. The applicant is present, so if you'd like to make any statements, now's your time to address the board.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for taking the time to consider this application. I do have an update that I did have an OSC for the property today, Suzanne Compton, and she was wonderful, and she is going to be submitting to me next week, and I will be submitting to the health department to expand the system to ensure that it's enough for 4 bedrooms, given the pull-out couch situation in the basement. To your point in the previous one, it has a window and its own exit, so and its own full bathroom as well, the basement, so that shouldn't cause any safety concern. But that is something that I'm hoping to get done as soon as possible.
Thank you. All right. And since we have a public hearing scheduled, I'll open the public hearing. This is your only opportunity to comment exclusively on this application. If you'd like to say anything, please address the board from the microphone and identify yourself by name and the district in which you reside.
I'm Margaret Bond. I'm in Piedmont District. I live in property which is adjacent to this property in question at 1032 FT Valley. In between the two properties, we actually share a property line. In between the two properties is 14 acres of woods and rock outcroppings and that sort of thing. So there's no visual contact between the two properties. I would say I'm somewhat familiar with the previous condition of the house, and Mr. Ellis has done a great job of bringing a sort of a poor, run-down piece of real estate into nice state, good use, good addition to the real estate for Rappahannock County. I'm here to support the application for the special use permit. I see no infringement or interference with my use and my husband's use of our property to the south. Oh, excuse me, to the south. I think there's only one other piece of property to the north, which is again a weekend use. As noted in your documentation, that's accessed by a major highway, so there should be no really additional interference with transportation. So we're happy to support this application, and don't, as a neighbor, the most affected neighbor, don't see any concerns for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret.
So I drove up there.
Hold on, just one formality. Anyone else wishing to speak? With that, I declare the public hearing closed. That's all right. I have to remind myself. Thank you. By all means, Steph, go ahead.
And it definitely seems that there aren't any close neighbors, except for, but it's not visible. I mean, it seemed like it was extremely private. Great view.
Thank you.
And the situation with the septic, I can't believe we're getting so many applications without any report about the septic system. It's rapid, I know.
Well, it's just, anywhere in the state is a function of time, and so you have historical properties and older homes. Those records, while they might have existed at one time, record keeping is a tricky thing.
This is not an older home.
It was built in 1987, and it was just renovated,
Okay.
but
That's not an older
that
home,
is
Mike.
fair enough.
I mean, by then, we should have had records. I find it frustrating.
Memphis Party was probably working then, so we should ask her.
But it's going to, I would find it's hard to approve for that number of people without having some kind of documentation about the capability of the septic system.
But you just said that you had a person out there
Yeah.
that did work, and they're gonna submit plans to you to increase it to 4 bedrooms.
Yes.
Was that Susan Hanley?
Yes.
From Luray?
Yes, exactly.
And she was a former state employee in Culpeper County. So,
Yeah, I would just add, I think it would be reasonable of us to make any recommendation contingent on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, Tommy, did you have any?
I do have a question. I'm getting confused on this magisterial versus, you're in Hawthorne or you're in Piedmont?
Oh, you're asking the wrong.
It's historically Stonewall Hawthorne.
Well, and it's Stonewall, there are 6
Magisterial
magisterial districts.
Okay.
But
And I think what we're going to do is not list them anymore.
Because when I said you were in Piedmont, I'm like,
But it's Piedmont voting
Why?
district. It is nice to know, and it is interesting, but it is confusing too.
Yeah, it is.
All right.
The
yeah,
question is, who do you vote for supervisor?
Yeah.
yeah, the septic thing's been addressed, so that's my, asterisk, if you will, but other than that.
Since I guess this is sort of in Stonewall Hawthorne district, did you have any?
No, I mean, it's very interesting to have these two applications on the same evening. and it kind of goes to the heart of this challenge about roads and settings and neighborhoods. I think you're very fortunate to have a neighbor who showed up on your.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. It's a rare act of citizenry to show up and support something that your neighbor wants to do. So, other than that, I don't have any other questions, and I don't know if others have been given an adequate opportunity. If so, I'd be glad to make the recommendation.
I just wanted to check in. Tommy, did you have anything to say?
Just a comment, I don't think you'll get many visitors that own the Corvette.
Yeah. Yeah, the driveway, that was kind of impressive.
But you've got a
I've seen it
beautiful,
around.
beautiful place up there, and it's definitely secluded, and I would, I just made that as more of just a comment. And it may even be a suggestion that people with four-wheel drives will enter
Yes.
the lot too. But
Yeah.
I think you'll get plenty of customers, so I just,
No, I agree, and once the trucks with the furniture stop, I'm gonna resurface that, because some of those bumps are becoming pretty pronounced. And I do not have four-wheel drive, so.
Oh, yeah, well, who made it up? So
Right.
there you go.
Exactly, I'm still able to get up and down.
That's good to know. Those are my concerns too, the steepness of the driveway, and some of the ruts that are forming at the top. But if you have heavy deliveries, that does totally explain it. I didn't have any trouble getting up there, but I was sort of white knuckling it as I got to the top, like, I hope I'm close.
Yeah.
So that was my only concern, but there will be people that will see four-wheel drive only, and they'll say, oh, that's the place I want to be. So I think it'll be a helpful thing for you.
You could just put an advisory steep
Yeah, I'll
drive.
I'll recommend it, but it's recommended.
So, Alan, did you have anything?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Gary?
Well, I move that we recommend approval of this application, subject to final approval of the septic system by the Department of Health and subject to the conditions of the staff report.
I'll second that motion.
Just for clarity, that's approval of the health department for the septic for 4 bedrooms.
Well, from my perspective, it's whatever ends up being approved, or how about I phrase it this way, that the number of occupants be limited to the number of septic approved bedrooms times 2. So that means if somehow you can't get it up to code for 4, then we would approve it for 6.
Then I'll keep my second in place there, Gary. Is that clarified enough for the record?
And the no food service?
Yes.
And
And the permit terminates upon the sale or transfer of the property.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Your next stop will be at the BZA.
Great.
You're welcome to stay, or you're welcome to leave.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you for coming in. That's good.
Thank you. All right, let's take this to public comment. This is a portion of the meeting where anyone that wishes to speak is welcome to do so. Just come to the microphone and state your name and the district you're in.
Coming to learn about the Julie Ford, they were a tale of 2 different areas. So no, I don't have any comment.
Anita?
It's been an interesting evening.
You never know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
All right, with that, I'll declare the public comment closed. We have no new business this evening. This takes us to old business, the zoning ordinance amendment regarding vehicle access to events. With direction from the board of supervisors. We had set this aside last month, thinking we would take it up fresh this month, and see if there were any details we could add to this language that might make it better, for lack of a different word.
So, Madam Chairman, I don't know, I sent it fairly late, but I did provide a proposed markup to this language, and if it's pleased the chairwoman and the commission, I'd be glad to explain and I mean, my goal was to make it more acceptable, not necessarily something I was in favor of. So I think, and from my opinion, I think I could accept these changes. I'm not sure that they would withstand the legal scrutiny, but I'd be glad to explain what I changed and why.
That would be great, thank you, Gary, I didn't see that earlier.
So, the first change was to add open to the public. This could be the legally questionable part, because I understand from a safety standpoint, everybody has to be treated equally, but at least from my naive position, the uninformed public has right to be more protected than, families or private organizations. So I feel like that's a reasonable distinction for these events. So, and that would also limit the family, family reunion, etc. I also thought 25 motor vehicles was a more reasonable size gathering to take issue with. It's still a fairly arbitrary number, but 10 seemed very clearly too low to me. I propose just limiting it to motor vehicles, because when you look at those definitions in the code, those other items, motorcycles, motorhomes, are all examples of motor vehicles. So to me, that was unnecessary verbiage. Maybe there's some reason why it was there that was not apparent to me, but my proposal would be to strike that and just limit it to motor vehicles, same as the next part. And then with respect to the second paragraph, it struck me based on our purpose, we were getting into this and thinking about, well, what if it's a field, and what if, rather than make it so that vehicles may pass, which is ambiguous as to whether that means they could pass at one point or they could pass the entire way or something in between. I thought that by changing it to say that they may pass in each direction, that is for simultaneous ingress and egress, without obstruction on an all-weather surface. So that would imply that we don't really care if it's through a field or maybe it's one way in and another way out, but there's two. To me, this allowed more flexibility in addressing the actual safety concern. So those were my proposed edits, and again, I'm still not sure I would have come up with this, but to me, these make it less problematic than its previous version.
Any other conversation on this?
So, yeah, a little conversation. I think 25 is pushing the envelope a lot, particularly if you're having a gathering of an ag event. I think that's pushing it, and I think that creates a burden on whatever area you're using. And, that gives free rein for a lot of smaller stuff, up to 24 vehicles a day, with no restrictions on the access and things like that. So I think that creates a pretty big loophole that I guess that we're trying to address here. I'm tending to think that it's good to define these motor vehicles. I mean, it's usage of 10 more letters, 10 more words, and I think people need to know that, hey, so they won't have to ask that a motorcycle is a vehicle. If it's stated in there, it's pretty clear, and you do have a lot of other vehicles coming to these type of events. I know particularly down at Death Ridge in Culpeper there at the brewery, they have people that bring in all types of RVs, either pull them up trucks or they drive them in, and they retreat to there during the day and maybe stay there at night. So you got those kind of issues going on. And I think as we move forward on the next line of the next paragraph, necessarily frontage or approved access required, I think we need to dive into that some more there on what is defined as approved access and what does frontage mean. Was that frontage on this private road? What we're looking for and how we define that, and looking at how this access is defined. Second, on the final paragraph, I guess we need to talk about without obstruction. And all-weather surface, I guess that just means gravel or something greater than gravel. And question, I guess, for you, Gary, is does our type 2 road come into play in this at all? Or-
It's not contemplated to in the current drafting. I suppose it could, and type 2, as I discussed before, would not necessarily meet this requirement. So a type 2 road needs to have 12-foot wide travelway, not enough for 2 cars to pass, but at least once every 300 feet have a place for people to pass. And so type 2 is used in the ordinance here and there. One place is that if you have a subdivision with 5 or fewer parcels, we say that a type 2 road is okay. You don't have to pass everywhere. And then the other place that you've just talked about 2 times, well, 1 time, is that if you want to have a tourist home, then, and you live on a private road, that private road must at least meet type 2 standards, which is 12 feet wide minimum and ability to pass every 300 feet with a few other criteria. And what this envisions is that when there's a more intensive use than a 5-lot subdivision or a tourist home that might have 8 people, or less than 10 or fewer people by state code, and it's 25 cars, or 30 cars, whatever, then that's not okay. It's not okay to have a 12-foot wide road. You've got to have a better road than a 12-foot wide road when you have this number of cars that are going to come together. Sorry for a convoluted answer.
Shouldn't what is required be defined other than wide enough to pass?
Yeah, so you could, one way to get at this, you could define a type 2B or whatever type road you want, and then ascribe requirements to it, width, et cetera. And then rather than say the road has to function in this way, your road has to meet these standards. To Mr. Light's point, it might be acceptable to have your ingress and egress routes not immediately adjacent, because the point is, if people are flowing out, you want emergency responders to get in, or vice versa. If the emergency responders are on scene and something happens and people are streaming out, they should be able to get out another way. So the type of road might not cover that, or you can define it to cover that, and however you want to do it.
So what are we looking to define as the width of the road? So 2 vehicles can pass each other without no tires leaving the gravel? Or is it okay for 2 tires on a vehicle to go off the gravel? So that's.
So as Art and I conceived this, it would be all tires on an all-weather surface, which is probably gravel, could be asphalt, could be something, but not grass and mud.
What about fields? I mean, look, think about, we're about to have this big race at Bend and Narrows.
Sure. Yeah, those are the difficult questions that the Board of Supervisors would like you to wrestle with. And once you get into an open field and there are 100 drive paths, maybe we're beyond the scope of this, but when you choke down to a point where you have a drive path, there needs to be at least 2, right, in and out. And if it fans out into a field, well then that's less of a constriction for emergency responding vehicles to get in. At that point, it's where the restriction is the critical point. And maybe there's a way to build that into the language as well.
What about just pass each other without on all-weather surface? Because what does it matter if it's not an all-weather surface, as long as they can pass each other?
Well, because we can't predict that the terrible event is going to happen on a sunny day. And so you've just had these torrential downpours and it's just a mud pit. And now instead of a car's not being able to pass each other and being blocked, they're all stuck in the mud.
Yeah.
So, if you want to invite 25, 50, 100 cars to your property to do an event,
then you have to make sure your property it can accommodate those vehicles coming and going in all weather conditions.
I don't see that.
And it occurs to me in the first paragraph, we probably need, I think it's the intention that any gathering opening to the public that attracts 25 or more vehicles at one time.
Correct.
We don't want the.
That's the intention.
We've got to have it
Yeah.
at one time.
If there's only 2 cars ever there at a time, or 3 cars there at any time, they happen to spread themselves over 24 hours, not an issue.
I thought that was accommodated by gathering.
And we did discuss
Imply,
that.
Okay, there we go.
in a way, it's, I at least, in trying to make minimal touch on this, felt that the gathering of 25 cars implied at a given time.
But there's no penalty for being verbose, as Mr. Henry said. You can add that redundant language if it helps the reader understand what you mean.
I just find that we all, and people that preceded us tend to understand things perfectly when we take it up, and then later everyone's wondering what we meant.
So if you put in there 25 cars at one time, you know, if it's an art show or something where you have that much turnover every hour, and you can have 300 cars in there a day. And I think that if you're trying to make it safe, I think you just defeated what you're trying to do.
That's a different issue, I think.
We're worried about public safety vehicles gaining access to the property when the worst condition happens and people are trying to leave all at one time.
I still have to say, my basic problem with that is that when you have an emergency and everyone's trying to get out, every entrance becomes an exit, no matter what you do.
Quite possible. At least in that case, you empty out twice as fast.
And in my attempt to change it, that's why I thought at least this gets 2 paths. If there's somehow you can simultaneously exit and ingress under normal conditions, at least then that gives us somehow 2 car widths of all weather surface.
What I'm trying to say here too is that if you say 25 cars at once, you basically gutted the safety feature because everybody's going to say, oh, I'm not going to have no more than 25 cars at once. So you just gutted what you're trying to do.
Well, I just wonder too, Al, when we talk about the races, I mean, there'll be a huge impact there. Do the races have, I haven't been in a long time, do they have emergency medical people on site, or will this?
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
so you could put that carve out into the
I think
language.
we ought to put that carve out in, that if emergency medical responders.
July, too.
Or but there's emergency responders on site on the 4th also.
Or put it on the onus of the event holder that they're responsible for providing traffic control, egress and exit individuals at various points or whatever. Because if it's an event like the I don't want to say plank to plank, but point-to-point races, law enforcement's going to be there anyway.
Right, exactly. That's what my recollection from a long time ago was.
So that could be an additional clause added. I think the intent was that this would apply in situations where you didn't have that on.
Right, so you could, this definition of traffic event impacting safe access could be conditioned and say, any gathering where public safety personnel are not present, ... right? So you get out of jail free card and then move on.
I think that's necessary, a necessary addition. How does everybody feel about 25 cars?
I think it might need to be more, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, if I'm going to do an event, I want to read this and say, you know what? I'm not going to have only 20 cars at a time, so this doesn't apply to me.
And maybe that's okay.
But I know I'm going to have 50 at a time. And that's a Saturday.
So it's a
or Sunday.
complaint, and so that's where, a notice of violation can be issued if we have photographic evidence, and you did it, you were going to get a violation, you're going to get a fine, now you might not do it next time.
So Gary, then you get into neighbor against neighbor, and then you get into the same situation we have up the road.
Well, we hope that people follow the law, right? But then when they don't, then we have to go through enforcement, and yes, it can be complex, but in a situation where there's a photograph that shows 26 cars, that's a violation. There's just no 2 ways about it.
And then somebody will say, well, 3 of those cars were mine. Don't care. Yeah, you do care. for long queues.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I own 50 cars, the other.
Well, I think again, going back to my understanding of the motivation for this was not the one-time or infrequent events, but the rather regular agritourism type events that otherwise are free to do what they want. And in that scenario, I think even if it happened 2 or 3 times before you had solid evidence, I think it would have the intended effect eventually. It might, and for me, you know, allowing a little bit of grace and lenience to prevent what we're really trying to prevent, which is the more kind of perpetual egregious challenges, is worth it. I just feel like
If I'm gonna be using my property for an event, I'm gonna see 25 as a get out of jail free card that I can manipulate. If that threshold is 10, I'm gonna say, well, you know what, I know I can't squeeze in that number, and, you know.
But do you really want to make sure that everybody has a two-way entrance for a 10-car
At some point in
event?
time, those 10 cars are gone, and they're gone before emergency responders are worrying about it. The queue time and delay time and confusion, you know, it picks up at some point in time, right? And I don't think there's an absolute in every situation. You're trying to just generally identify where does it start to get so concentrated that orderly egress becomes a challenge during those heightened events. And it's not one car, and it is definitely 100 cars, but, you know, in the middle, is it 25? I don't know.
It's one thing if it's an annual event like, you know, the art show or something like that, where, you know, property gets used once a year. But if somebody's really engaged in agritourism, and they're gonna have something, you know, every week, or every day, then, you know, that's pretty much, that's a whole different story. That's, you know.
When the board talked about this, and, you know, Mr. Carney and his brother's own location, and so it's very typical for them to have 25 or more cars. And so the question, and the board, the planning commission and the board of supervisors, BZA, have no control over whether that farm brewery went there or not. Had no control over what kind of road they had. They could have put a single lane road if they wanted to. You had no control. So the question is that okay for them to have that number of cars, more, and even more than that when they have an event there that we have no control over? So fortunately, they do have wide enough access to provide two-way traffic. And they saw that as a business value, presumably. Why else would they spend the extra money for the width? And so you're just trying to police those situations where maybe an entrepreneur who has a winery and they grow grapes, you know, 360 days out of the year, but the other days they want to invite 200 of their closest friends to come have a party. And is a 2-lane dirt road okay for that?
So, for example,
Or a 1-lane dirt road?
if something like we talked a lot about the Washington winery and that road, we sort of talked about that and addressed it in the context of the overnight bed Airbnb. But if they just didn't do that, but did everything else that they currently do, then we wouldn't have had the ability to restrict that use. This would give us the ability to control that use for those events that attract multiple vehicles.
Or mandate that they correct the road.
Or mandate that they correct the road.
Only if they have more than 25 cars.
Right, right. Which apparently there was an event there just the other day that somebody told me there were well in excess of 25 cars.
I want to ask Anita, for the fox hunt, how many cars are there on like a Saturday? They're probably more than 25, wouldn't you guess?
Yeah, there's probably more than 25.
And they're certainly not on all-weather surfaces.
And is the truck or the trailer, is that one vehicle, or is that?
Maybe that's
No,
one.
I would consider you treat it as one vehicle, but it takes up a lot more space than a car. On the other hand, I go to Garden Week every year, 2 or 3 different counties sometimes, and some of those places I think it was last year, I think it was Culpeper or something, and they had us park across the highway, and they had a sheriff there stopping traffic for people to cross at certain times. And because the driveway into the house was too narrow. Now, I've been on some of those other tours where the driveway's been narrow, and there's been somebody with a walkie-talkie at each end, and they let people in and out accordingly. So they've coordinated it. Now, I don't know if the counties make them do it, or the Garden Club of Virginia, which would make sense that they would think about the safety things. But, yeah, fox hunting, and I always say, you know, as Reed always says, there's always a gate in every field.
Steph, I think possibly the hunt, the steeplechase races are an issue, but I think if we follow the language open to the public, I don't think the fox hunts are really open to the public.
Yeah, okay.
That's to their membership only. So
And they're fox hunting after all, they're obviously risk takers.
No, well, there's that.
Trust me, they picked up bodies at fox hunts everywhere that you can
We know
imagine.
there's a good use of emergency vehicles for
Yes.
those events, but, that would do it.
So I think we've decided that we need to account for the emergency vehicles on site for those situations where it's sure to exceed 25, which is the number we're currently working with. I have to say, not the garden tour, but in Rappahannock County, the art tour is one of the events. And the other event is the fun tour. That I was concerned about the 25 window, and I thought maybe a slight nudge toward 30 or 35 might be in order, but I really think most of those sites, you probably won't have more than 25 cars at a time. The art show you might.
You might. Gosh. You might.
But maybe we should reach out to the organizers of those events and see what their feelings are.
Just a thought, because of the art tour, occasionally they've had demonstrations listed at certain times. I've gone to see Noel a number of times over the years because he was going to do a demonstration at a certain time. That happens at Garden Week too sometimes, if there's a demonstration of some sort. So that pulls more people to one site at some point in time. But it's a short period of time. It might be, half hour, 25 minutes, an hour at the most.
It's probably
You're
not.
damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. In this case, really, you're in a tough situation.
Well, my view of that is, you're trying to mitigate for the peak situation. Chances are good if there's some event, especially when you chose an interesting example, one involving fire and molten metal, but what could go wrong? Yeah, what could go wrong? But
it's art.
Yeah, but I think those are, even if a different example, the times when you're most likely to have some need, just because of the, it's a numbers game, right? I mean, the more people you have, the more likely it is that you will have both a need and a problem with the traffic. So, I went to 25 just because I thought 10 was too low, but I also think it might be reasonable to go higher for my personal view.
And the more numbers you put on this, then the more you gut it, the more you defeat the
That
purpose
is
of doing it.
true.
One of the most interesting planning commission meetings I ever attended was when Gary Settle was chairman, and Big Cliff Miller came in to do his barn up in there into an event center. And so Richie Burke came, I believe the second month, and we got on the topic of access to the property. And he said that cars would melt within 250 feet of the building that it burned. Everybody's eyes just fell wide open, and it was like, wow. So, the more cars you put in this thing, the more likely it is you're going to have a problem, and you're gutting the ordinance to try to control the things you want to control. So you put whatever y'all agree to is fine.
Well, you know, that barn is another good example. I mean, what's that, they used to have the.
Well, there's all kinds of very explicit stipulations, because again, we're dealing with a special exception permit, so there were a lot of conditions written in there. Interestingly, I was trying to contemplate, I don't believe that even with that paved road, there are still a couple of bottlenecks. I'm not sure you would actually meet these requirements.
No, I
on
don't
that
think
road.
you can.
My recollection, last time I was in there for
Yeah.
the regional commission dinner, is that it's not too
Yeah.
bad.
That's
And
a-
so, the retrofit there is then, okay, now they have to put a gravel shoulder on each side, sort of thing. If they want to accommodate events with 25 or more.
Well, and
vehicles.
they specifically they would be grandfathered and they have their conditions, or how would you?
No, I don't think they would be grandfathered, and you and the BZA board would be constrained on future SUPs and SCs you couldn't grant one
Yeah.
that doesn't align with this, right? So the one that most recently came up was Mr. Swindler, and whether that property would fit in the box, and Mr. Frazier brought it up during the public hearing at board level, well, so how does this fit with this thing that we might do? Keep that in mind, even though it doesn't constrain you at this time. And I think, they have a loop with a kind of a conscription at this.
Yeah, I think there's only one way they got close to the.
But I can't recall what it is.
Anyway.
How many people, do you remember they used to do the headwaters thing there? That must have been.
Any cars?
Yeah,
Any cars.
that was,
Yeah. And
that
so
would meet any limit we could.
the argument could be made, well, nothing's ever happened before, so it's okay.
No, I know.
So I think we have a couple of things to fold into this language tonight. Did you capture them, Gary?
Well, I've got the, any gathering without public safety personnel on site, open to the public, that attracts 25 or more motor vehicles.
Could we, I'm sorry to cut in, but with respect to the language about motor vehicles or, could we say including motorcycles and motorhomes? Because I don't like the ambiguity, because to say they're or seems to ignore the fact that one includes the other. So I take the point that there's no problem being redundant, I just don't like to imply that motorcycles are not motor vehicles. So could we say including motorcycles and?
So I would defer to Mr. Goff relative to what does Virginia Code 46-100 say, and then based on that.
You can bring it up, I looked at it, it's got the definitions and they're all right there, and motorcycles and motorhomes are,
So then it's the difference between do you want a John Q. citizen who's not going to chase down a state code section to know what this means?
Yeah. Well, and I take the point I think Mr. Henry made, that why not be redundant? I'm just saying, as a compromise, motor vehicles, parens, including motorcycles, motorhomes, and whatever other types of motor vehicles we want to inform the public are motor vehicles, rather than say motor vehicles or.
Yeah, I don't think that's a problem.
I would hope not.
I think that's fine. Does everyone else find that agreeable?
Yeah, sure.
And I do think to kind of beat, the issue over the head, motor vehicles at any one time, we need to add there too. And then the definition of motor vehicles, and then were there any other changes, Gary?
I think we need to add all-terrain vehicles.
So the second paragraph added to the frontage, and Mr. Henry brought this up, there's already a paragraph there for frontage and approved access required, and so Mr. Goff and I, as we were looking through the ordinance, where would this new language fit in the ordinance? And so it seemed appropriate to put it in the section that was called frontage or approved access required, which states each lot created subsequent to the adoption of this chapter shall have frontage on a public street or a private street authorized by the provisions of this, that, or the other thing. Said frontage shall be at least equal to the required minimum as required in this. And then the second paragraph would be, in these special situations, you have to have this special frontage. And that's why it was shown there as a second paragraph.
So it would, to your question, it would apply in any kind of road frontage situation where these kinds of gatherings occur.
Right. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. The discussion that Mr. Light brought up, and I trying to get at in this second paragraph, which is these two lanes don't need to be immediately adjacent.
Yeah.
I think that has merit. I don't know if this is the best or only way to do it.
Right.
But it's a way, I think, and we could ask Mr. Goff if he thinks, if that's the intent, how would he write that? If he's the one that has to defend it at some point in time, which he probably wouldn't be because our insurer would, but. But if he has to prosecute, he'll have to.
Well, that, to me, the term that is most begging of a definition is an all-weather surface, because I don't think that's defined anywhere else. But, you know, to me, the others, it's not crisp and clear, but at least I feel like you know what you're getting at, and anybody kind of looking at some kind of travel plan should know if the travel allows for simultaneous cars going one way and cars going the other way. That's what I was trying to achieve.
Or do you think we're able to get a definition for that?
So, determine whether he thinks we need to better define all-weather surface. If it's not defined in the zoning ordinance, you're just going to open up the dictionary. So, is there enough there to have a prosecution stick? And then make it clear that simultaneous does not necessarily mean adjacent, and make sure that that is incorporated as well. I think I've got it.
So next step would be to get those edits in place and run them by the county attorney?
Yes, so what I'll find some time with the county attorney and bake in new words, get that back to the planning commission at your next meeting. And then hopefully at that point, it would be in a form close enough for you to maybe tweak it here and there and authorize it for public hearing.
Okay.
At the next one.
Dictionary definition of all-weather surface means an improved surface that is constructed of concrete, asphalt, or similar dust-free, impermeable, or permeable material designed to withstand all weather conditions.
I don't think we want that.
No, so
there you go.
I don't know how. Yeah, so I don't know what dust has to do with all weather, but I've got the question and we will.
It confirms the importance of clarifying.
I think we do need to dial that in. I would agree.
And I'm confident that the board does not intend every road to be asphalt or concrete.
I'm pretty confident about that too.
The community would not appreciate it.
All right, that sounds good. Any other thoughts before we send it on to the county attorney for review? Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, I think the surface is going to be a problem.
I think we can probably get our hands around it. Thank you so much for your work on that, Gary. Great to get that moving along. Berkeley Group zoning ordinance update.
Yes. You have the handout in front of you. So this late add to your agenda. Berkeley Group, I reached out to the Berkeley Group after your last meeting. A previous meeting, I can't even remember if it was your last meeting.
It was the last meeting.
Okay, where we talked through the phase 1, 2, 3 that the Berkeley Group included in their work plan. And so Rebecca Cobb reviewed the discussion with me from that meeting on the phone, and I encouraged her to watch the video, which she did. And her goal was to modify phase 1 so that it was constrained to those objective matters that are process and order based, that the Berkeley Group can tackle that work, which is a lot of work. Gain the faith of the Planning Commission and the public before we even venture into the more subjective things of what's allowed to go where and what are the requirements.
Great.
So this is before you. I know you haven't had a lot of time to review it. And you can see the proposed schedule Their availability is pushed a little bit, so you're not forced to look at this and say, yeah, this is perfect tonight, but I wanted to get it in front of you as soon as possible. Take any feedback you have. Otherwise, I think it's okay for you to digest this between this meeting and next meeting, and really hope to provide direction to Berkeley Group at your next meeting.
I wasn't clear, are the hourly rates instead of, I mean, are they add-ons or are they already baked into the task descriptions?
Yes. So the hourly rates are baked into the task, so the tasks are developed through numbers of hours and hourly rates.
Great.
There are certain things that we could add on, for example, them being at a meeting in person versus Zoom and things like that, that this helps us do that more easily. That makes sense?
Sounds good.
So
Anybody have any questions?
I would just say, since I feel like I was one of the chief complainers about this the last time, I think it's a vast improvement and it addressed a lot of the concerns that I had.
Yeah, it looks like that.
And I certainly never want to take a decision away from the body. If you want to decide that this is what you want to move forward with, I can pass that on to them. They're not going to start until May anyway. And they're currently working on sign ordinance review, which I also got them to make those 2 graphics that were needed for the sign ordinance.
It looks like they intend to join us in May.
As a kickoff. So it would be, as they start, let's all come together and really understand what we're going to do. Let's really talk through the scope, what's going to happen, and then off they go.
So if we adopt this in April, that'll be fine for that. You have something, Gary?
No, I was just going to ask that in the form of a question, but you confirmed it.
And I asked them to build that one in person, just because I think that
Great.
kickoff is important.
I'll look forward to it. I love that this also abbreviates our timeline to get it done.
That's just phase 1.
Get something done.
Well, that sounds good. Any other thoughts on this?
I was wondering, on the sign ordinance, whether or not I see they're not going to do a legal review. Is that?
Well, so Art has done that from day 1.
Yeah.
We could have asked them to do a legal review, in which case they would reach out to their trusted legal partner, Sharon Pandak, probably, to do that. So if we get this back and we want to have a second opinion, we would save the markup and just reach out to an outside party to do that.
Any other questions? All right, I did add roundtable discussion, just in case there's anything going on that anyone would like to discuss. Mr. Sisk, do you have anything?
No, I don't have anything outside what we talked about.
Ms. Griffin?
Good, thank you.
Distractions? Shelley?
I would just like to thank you for, on behalf of the supervisors, taking a look at the caninology BZA decision. I think that's an important matter that requires some further attention.
Ms. Turner? All right, I did wonder if there was anything prior to me joining you all that was set aside that we should consider adding back into the agenda rotation. I think you all had worked on some cell tower language in the past. Wireless structure language.
The comprehensive plan really expanded the detail breadth of telecommunication facilities, and the concept is that that would carry into the zoning ordinance at some point in time. I would suggest that, that's in phase 2 or plus of the Berkeley Group work.
Okay.
I think I might state that same circumstance slightly differently. I think we wrote a lot of ordinance language into our comprehensive plan.
Okay.
And we might want to take another look at that. But anyway, it's
5 years comes quick.
Boy, does it ever. Well, if there's nothing else, then For the good of the board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.